Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling Discussions. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about NXT, AEW, and another topic which I'll get into as I talk about NXT. Now, going into NXT, I'm only going to talk about the titles. I'm not going to get into the other matches right now just because it's a lot to get into, but I am going to talk about the four main titles. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with the NXT title. Obviously, at Vengeance Day, I've mentioned this a few times. We are going to see the NXT champion, Braun Breaker, defend his title against Grayson Waller in a steel cage match. Now, last night, major chaos ensued between the two, and I think this is good for both wrestlers. I think Grayson Waller is a very tough opponent for that of Braun Breaker due to the simple fact that Grayson Waller has brains. He is very smart, he's very crafty, and this is the one guy that on multiple occasions has been able to hurt Braun Breaker due to Braun Breaker's sheer ignorance when it comes to wanting to just brawl. Braun Breaker relies too much on strength more than he does strategy, whereas Grayson Waller realizes the disadvantage he's at, but he also takes advantage of the advantages he has, which is his speed, his accuracy, his brain, if you will. He's a very strategical wrestler, and that's why I do think that if anyone's going to take the title away from Braun Breaker, like, if it's not Carmelo Hayes, then I do strongly think it's going to be Grayson Waller. I think Grayson Waller has, I think this is long-term storytelling. Braun Breaker was the guy that kicked Grayson Waller out of the locker room. Braun Breaker was the guy that said, we don't want you here anymore. You're not a part of the NXT locker room. You're part of your own little locker room. And so this is long-term storytelling, and this is something that I think, honestly, would be good for the NXT Championship if Grayson Waller were to win the title, because it's exactly like when MJF won the AEW World title. It's the idea of put your biggest heel as the champion. They're going to get a lot of heat, but it's also going to be entertaining because you're going to have a wrestler every week or every other week challenge them for that title. And those wrestlers are going to get severely over because the crowd are going to cheer them more and more. They're going to pop for them more and more. And you're going to start building up more and more stars. And for a developmental brand like NXT, that's going to be very important to do because that's the whole point, right? You want to take those stars and you want to be able to build them up. You want to look at them and say, let's elevate them to the next level. And I think, especially with the help of Shawn Michaels, I think they can do that. And I think Grayson Waller as NXT champion will only add them to the next level a little bit more. And so I'm all for that, 100%. I think that is very beneficial. Now, we also saw Dijak and Wesley sit down together for this North American Championship match that is coming up. And this is interesting to me because, as I've said, I think Dijak should be the guy to beat Wesley. I think this is Dijak's match in the sense that this is another example of long-term storytelling. Dijak won the NXT North American Championship from day one, essentially. He used to feud with Keith Lee over it. He feuded with Roderick Strong over it. This guy always wanted the NXT North American Championship, and he has a vital opportunity of getting it if he plays his cards right. And Wesley is a tremendous athlete, but when it comes to a guy like Dijak, I just don't think it's in the cards for Wesley. I think Dijak is gonna, come out on top, and it's not to disrespect Wesley, it's to show. Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties. All right, technical difficulties. Sorry about that, but everything seems to be okay now. But what I was saying was, Dijak is in a position right now where he's back, but he's also not necessarily new. And so he can certainly win tonight, in my opinion. Like, this is certainly a great moment, a great opportunity for him to take it to Wesley. He can certainly win the belt when they fight at Vengeance Day. And so I'm 100% on the side of Dijak. And these aren't my predictions yet, but this is more so just my analysis currently. Now, like, I will go into more predictions later on as we get closer to the actual pay-per-view. But moving on, we also saw that we are going to be seeing Gallus versus Pretty Deadly versus the New Day versus an unknown team from the NXT Tag Team titles going in Vengeance Day. And this is interesting. Obviously, Pretty Deadly and the New Day have been having some, they have a huge rivalry going. Pretty Deadly, they're not a terrible tag team, but I do think that I do think right now that they're in a good position in the sense that they are what could potentially be NXT's next big tag team. Gallus is without a doubt a very nifty team, and so they will, I think, severely benefit from this match. The New Day, I think, you don't want to keep them on NXT too long due to the simple fact that I think it's safe to say that they are in a position right now where they, with the Royal Rumble coming up and such, you don't want to keep them on NXT forever. However, they're also in that position where they can severely benefit the other superstars. They can help out the other superstars that are in this developmental position. And so that's very helpful and that's very important for all of them. Now, moving on, well, not moving on, but staying on the topic of analyzing each tag team, there is a mystery tag team. We don't know who they are yet, and it sounds like we're going to slowly start finding out who they are. Duke Hudson and Chase, Andre Chase, are two competitors that are seemingly eligible for this opportunity. However, I am going to say this right now. From what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, it is also very likely that we are going to be seeing the return of a major NXT tag team known as AOP, otherwise known as Authors of Pain. Now, the Authors of Pain are former NXT Tag Team Champions, and I think if they were to come back, especially for Vengeance Day, I think it would be huge. On top of that, there was also talk of them not only coming back to WWE, but they would come back under the management of Paul Ellering, which is exactly how they started in WWE, which honestly was the best thing to happen in the sense that Paul Ellering is a great mind of this business, right? And he is a great manager for this business. He has that Paul Heyman like attribute, like in the way he carries himself in the ring, in terms of the way he does his talking and such. But he's also this guy that he's a man of few words, I think, at times, and he talks a little bit in a form of poetry, but his word, like the voice that he has is so powerful that his words hold so much meaning. And I think that's what a lot of people look at when they see this, like when they hear him talk. Now, last but not least, we also saw the Triple Threat Women's Summit for the NXT Women's Championship between Roxanne Perez, JC Jane, and Gigi Dolan. Now, obviously, many people have been questioning where JC Jane and Gigi Dolan stand together in this, and it seems like we got our answer last night. So last night, Roxanne Perez, Roxanne Perez is in a great position right now, I think, because she's in a position where she's still trying to get over. I think a little bit, like she's still trying, like she's obviously still in that developmental bit, but she's also right now in that position where she is just enjoying this and she's just for the ride, and her character is almost the same as how it was on Ring of Honor. And to be quite honest with you, the nice thing about that character is it's a lot like when Bayley first started on the main roster. It's that rookie like character that is so happy to see everyone and so excited to be here, but also when she gets in the ring, she tears it up and she really, does the best that she can. And so I like this idea of Roxanne Perez in this title position. On top of that, I like this idea of her versus Gigi Dolan and JC Jane, considering these are two women that are hated by the NXT women's locker room in the sense that they've tortured the women's locker room for how many years as Toxic Attraction, which Roxanne Perez pointed out last night. Now, on top of that, though, like I said, we saw JC Jane and Gigi Dolan finally kind of confirm some suspicions, and it looks like they are going to work as a unit. They put Roxanne Perez through a table, and they tricked us all. They made us think that maybe, just maybe, they were against each other. They were screaming at each other. They were pointing out very valuable things, like very interesting statements about one another. But on top of that, they ended up it seems to me as though they are still a unit, and they ended up holding the NXT Women's title together, which I find to be very interesting because this could be a sign that this is essentially not going to be a triple threat match. This is essentially going to be a handicap match. It reminds me almost of Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus AJ Styles at the Royal Rumble back in, I believe, 2018 for the WWE Championship, in the sense that it seems to me as though they almost want to have joint custody of the NXT Women's Championship, which I don't disagree with, because the more I think about it, the more JC Jane and Gigi Dolan do give the vibes of Michelle and Layla McCool. However, I do think JC Jane and Gigi Dolan aren't going to last. Like, I do think in this triple threat, they're going to end up turning on each other. I do think they're going to go at one another's throats. And I do think at the end of the day, Roxanne Perez is going to retain this title, because it's one of those matches where I think it's going to start off where, your friends and your allies, and then it's going to turn into worse. It's going to turn into more. And it's almost a lot like the D-Generation X versus John Cena match. It's a lot like Shawn and Triple H and John Cena at Survivor Series. But either way, I think it'll be hell of an entertaining match. And I think that might very well be match of the night going into NXT Vengeance Day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so moving on to tonight's AEW, we have a pretty big match card tonight, and I'm going to go through every one. So we have another TNT Championship Open Challenge match. Darby Allin has been defending the TNT Championship just about every week. He just defended it last Wednesday against Kushida in what was a very entertaining match. I do think Kushida was more entertaining than that of Darby Allin. Not to disrespect Darby Allin, to simply say that there are moments where Darby Allin is so wiry and so scrappy that he just kind of lets himself get beat to a point where his opponents are really the only ones doing anything until he finds a moment to wrap them up or roll them up or whatever. And tonight he's going to be taking on Buddy Matthews. Now, he requested this match. He wanted to fight Buddy Matthews. The reasoning, obviously, he fought Brody King, beat Brody King. He fought Malachi Black, beat Malachi Black. He never fought Buddy Murphy in singles action. He wants to fight Buddy Murphy. He wants to fight him tonight for the TNT Championship. Personally, I want Buddy Murphy to win. I'm a huge Buddy Murphy fan, and I would love to see him with the TNT title around his waist. On top of that, this is Buddy Murphy's first singles match back to AEW, and I think it's very vital that they don't screw over House of Black again like they kind of were doing, early on. However, all that being said, Darby Allin I don't think is anywhere close to losing the TNT Championship anytime soon. And so, in terms of predictions, I am going to go with Darby Allin for that match. Now, it was confirmed on Rampage last week that we were going to see this match. Jungle Hook is going to take on Ethan Page and Matt Hardy, and what it currently sounds like to me is that we will see Jungle Hook reunite for one more match, which is tonight. On top of that, Ethan Page and Matt Hardy kind of seem to be at a bit of a discourse. Matt's trying to prove that, he is Ethan's friend. He is working with Ethan. He's not against him. And Ethan's, still in that persona of that all-ego Ethan Page. His ego is never ending. It's always growing. So going into this match, I'm going to say Jungle Hook's going to get the win, just due to the simple fact that they already beat Lee Moriarty and Big Bill. There's no point in losing to Ethan Page and Matt Hardy going into this tonight. And on top of that, I think it's safe to say that Matt Hardy and Ethan Page are building up for what is a potential match, maybe going into Revolution, or maybe going into a Dynamite later down the line, I don't know. But it does seem as though Matt Hardy will eventually go against that of Ethan Page later down the line. Now, we're also going to see a triple threat match between DMD, Dr. Britt Baker, Ruby Soho, and Toni Storm. Now, my money for this match is on my money for this match is on Toni Storm. I'm predicting Toni Storm for this match simply due to the fact that she has Saraya, and Saraya is willing to cheat. And yes, Dr. Britt Baker has Jamie Hayter, and yes, she has Rebel. However, all that being said, this match is also kind of going to put Jamie Hayter at some point, right? This is going to put them amongst the rankings a little more. And so this is where you want to look at it and kind of think, okay, well, Baker versus Hayter seems like it should wait a little longer, right? Ruby Soho, obviously, yes, she just had a great street fight with Anna Jay and Ty Mello, and I had said this before. Tony Storm seems to be in a weird position right now. Her and Saraya 100% seem to be as though they're turning heel. And on top of that, she seemed to have angered that of Ruby Soho. She seemed to have angered that of Willow Nightingale and that of Hikaru Shida. I think personally that Tony Storm is in a position right now where Ruby Soho and most of the rest of the women's division don't know what to make of Tony Storm anymore. And I think that makes her dangerous. I think that very viable for this match. And so I'm going to go with Tony Storm on this one. I don't know. I just feel like maybe potentially that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to do Tony versus Hayter again. That does seem to be a fan favorite in the sense that I think it's long-term storytelling. And this time, if they fight again, Tony Storm will have Saraya in her corner. And so I think that's very interesting. And I would like to see it. Now, we're also going to see Bryan Danielson versus Brian Cage. Now, last week, MJF hired Brian Cage for this match and had said, I don't care if you win, I don't care if you lose, but break his arm. Obviously, prediction-wise, I'm going with Bryan Danielson. We've seen this happen with MJF. He did it with Wardlow, Cody Rhodes, Chris Jericho, CM Punk. It's the trials of MJF, right? You have to go through them every time if you want a big pay-per-view match with that of MJF, and that's what Bryan Danielson's doing. He fought Ethan Page. He fought Bandito. He's gonna fight Brian Cage tonight. Brian Cage, yeah, maybe he'll get close to injuring. Maybe he'll injure the arm of Bryan Danielson, but I don't think it's going to stop Danielson. My money and my prediction is on Bryan Danielson for tonight's match, for sure. Now, we're also going to see Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara take on Ricky Starks and Action Andretti. Now, this is interesting. Ricky Starks has a victory over Chris Jericho. He has a victory over Jake Hager, and now he's going to fight alongside Action Andretti, and they're going to take on Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho. Now, Action Andretti has a victory over Chris Jericho. He has a victory over Daniel Garcia. Both wrestlers seem as though they're in a very prime position here. Ricky Starks, ever since his match with MJF, has been in a position where he's been on almost every Dynamite and he's been doing nothing but getting elevated more and more and more. And Action Andretti is in a position where he's getting some very valuable screen time. And on top of that, he's getting some very interesting victories under his belt that is going to do nothing but elevate him and push him further and further up that totem pole as this, as this storyline with Action Andretti unfolds. Predictions wise, I am going to say Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara simply due to the fact that Ricky Starks already has a victory over two members of the JAS. Action Andretti already has two victories over two members of the JAS. I don't see the JAS getting a third loss, especially 2 weeks in a row. 3 weeks in a row. And so I think, well, maybe not 3 weeks in a row, but very close to one another, And so I think for sure that the Jericho Appreciation Society is going to have some things up their sleeves. I think they're going to have Ty Mello and Anna Jay waiting for them this time because obviously last time, having Daddy Magic and Cool Hand Luke wasn't enough. Having Jake Hager wasn't enough. And so I think they're going to have the entire JAS out there tonight to help them out. But, I don't know. My money's on Jericho and Guevara for this one. Now, moving on, we're also going to see the Guns and the Acclaimed in a family mediation with Billy Gunn. Now, this is interesting because we have to know where Billy Gunn stands on this, right? And this is another, I talked about this earlier when talking about NXT. This is another sign of long-term storytelling, that big build-up, right? This idea of the Acclaimed and the Gun Club has started how many years? Not how many years, but how many months ago? On top of that, you have Billy Gunn, who originally was on the side of the Gun Club, then he switched to the Acclaimed, then he went back to the Gun Club, and now he's back with the Acclaimed. This guy keeps switching sides. At the end of the day, the question you have to ask yourself is Billy Gunn really daddy ass, or is he Billy Gunn, the father to the sons, the father to Austin and Colton? And when you think of it that way, you think maybe this was all meant to put the Guns over. I mean, the Guns beat FTR. They supposedly buried FTR's legacy, right? And potentially maybe be the new AEW World Tag Team Champions. And I mean, and we've seen it before. When you come off a big high, like the Gun Club is doing right now, after beating such an impressive team such as FTR, then they're in a prime position, and I mean a genuinely prime position, to take the AEW tag titles off of the Acclaim. Like, this is a major moment right now for the Gun Club. They are in a very high position right now. Like, they're riding this all the way versus Jay Lethal. Now, we have never seen Mark Briscoe nor Jay Briscoe, his, unfortunately, his, late brother. Neither of them have been on TV. They've only wrestled on indies, unfortunately, or on YouTube, but obviously going with Mark Briscoe. This is 100% going to be a tribute to his brother. Jay Lethal and Jay Briscoe are no strangers to one another. I think Mark Briscoe is going to get the victory. And on top of that, this could potentially, I'm not too sure. However, you never know. You never know what the future holds. And I am just going to say this now. Jay, you always had a saying, reach for the sky. It was in your intro. Reach for the sky, brother. I hope you're in a good place right now. Same for Mark. Match tonight. I hope you know that your brother's in a good place, and I hope you yourself are in a good place. And I love the Briscoes. So big shout out to the Briscoes. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I appreciate the support, as always. If you have any specific topics you want me to dive into or make more, feel free to comment that down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. As always, I know I said this earlier, but as always, thank you for tuning in, and peace out.